I'm a big fan of Lord of the Rings. In fact, is my favorite movie series of all time. However, the new show, The Rings of Power, feels a lot like plastic. My problem with The Rings of Power is that is a fantasy world without a magic. What do I mean by that? The Rings of Power is great visually. It is exactly how you would expect a fantasy world to look like. In fact, I would even argue it's better looking than the original Lord of the Rings. It's so well done visually, it's stunning. However, my problem is with the magic underlying the world. In general, the Lord of the Rings, it's only on the surface about magic. Let me explain what I mean by that. I would argue, at least for me, that the best moment of Lord of the Rings is not Sauron great armor or the dragons or the Balrog or whatever fantasy creature you might think. That is part of why we are intrigued by that world, because we see that there is so much into it, so much fantasy, so much magic, so much interesting creatures that we're just drawn into it. I would say that that part of the world intrigues us, but it's not why I love Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings is magical because of the dialogue and because of the story underlying the events. Everyone can imagine weird creatures and makes things interesting, but what we really relate to is the story and the meaning behind it and what the story teaches us. And The Lord of the Rings, at least for me, my favorite part, at least from the movies, is when Frodo and Gandalf talk in Moria. And Gandalf says to Frodo, "So do all who live to see such times, but that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us." That is the magic of Lord of the Rings for me, that dialogue, those moments, which are so important, especially when you consider a character of Gandalf, because Gandalf, just a few scenes after, sacrificed himself to the Balrog, and then of course he comes back. But those lines have greater importance also because they are put in the context of what happened next. And that's why the Lord of the Rings is so magical. I would argue it's not so much for the creatures, it's not so much the fantasy. The fantasy is just the superficial side of Lord of the Rings. What really draws me is the story behind it, is Aragorn's speech in front of certain death. It's Sam risking everything for Frodo, grabbing him and going towards the entrance of Mount Doom. The reason why Lord of the Rings is so magical are those emotional moments, those, whether it's dialogue, whether it's an action, whether it's a particular situation. Those are the parts that really makes Lord of the Rings magical. It's not how good it looks. Of course, if it looked trash, it would be very hard for us to believe it as viewers and like it. But this leads me to the problem of the Rings of Power. I don't see much magic going on right now. And I don't think it's a bad show necessarily. I like to watch it. I will keep watching it. At the moment, I'm at episode 6, so this counts from episode 1 to 6. I don't know what happened next. Maybe the show redeem itself, maybe not. I'm not sure. But so far, I can only praise the visuals of the Rings of Power. And I have to say, I have to give credit to certain things. Like, for example, I like a lot the relationship between the dwarf and Elrond. I think I can feel that emotion. That's magical. That's the only magical relationship that I can see right now in the series. At least the only one that I can connect with to a deep level. I think also the problem, at least for me, the biggest problem, and this is related to the fact that the magic is lacking, is that the Rings of Power is very unfocused. It's such an unfocused show. You have 4 parallel stories. You have Meteor Man, you have Elrond and the Dwarf, you have Galadriel and the Numenor, you have the Southlanders and the Orcs. Now they merged in episode 6, the Southlanders fighting the Orcs with the Numenor, and Galadriel. Those stories sort of merged. But up to episode 6, you have so many stories, and it's so unclear what's the point of everything. Like, we know that the rings are going to be made. We know that the rings are going to happen eventually. But in Lord of the Rings, we know that the objective is to destroy the ring, and that leads the entire action of the movies. But here, there's no real clear question. Like, we know that they're going to make the rings, and we're sort of wondering how they're going to make it. But this doesn't follow a clear path. It's like so many stories all bundled together, and it's to me it's actually quite annoying. So, why would you drag on so much Meteor Man with the Harfoots? I don't understand that. Like, okay, this mysterious character, what's the deal with it? And the bigger question probably that really is going through everyone's mind is, who is Sauron, right? That's the big question, because it's not clear who is Sauron. But that's not really enough. We know that Sauron is going to be deceiving and turning himself into an elf or whatever creature to sort of create these rings eventually. But it's just boring to me, because it's just so unfocused. It's not clear. It's like 4 stories that exist all at once. It's not as clear, I would argue, as the Lord of the Rings, in which they just clearly have to destroy the rings. And I would argue it's even less clear than The Hobbit, because even in The Hobbit, we know that the hobbits are supposed to go kill Smaug and, reach the Lonely Mountain and all of that. But here, we just know that the rings are going to happen at one point, and that we are wondering who is Sauron, and that's it. And we have 4 stories going on, and honestly, I can connect with only one. I can only connect with the story of Elrond and the dwarf so far. I like Galadriel as a character, but in this show, I don't know. I always saw Galadriel as more of a fairy type of character, so it's a bit hard to, come into the series with that picture in your mind and try to work yourself through this new narrative in just 1 or 2 episodes or whatever it was. I mean, I have to give credit to the dwarf and elf storyline, because at least it's interesting to see when dwarves and elves, those type of relationship. I really like to see that. It's meaningful in Lord of the Rings with Gimli and Legolas, and it's meaningful in the series too. So I really like that dynamic. And then the Southlanders with the orcs. We know the Southlanders are going to lose. The end of episode 6, Mount Doom erupted. We know that's going to happen. So we're sort of spoiled. I don't want to. Like, I know they are trying to build the return of Sauron, and so, but we sort of know that's going to happen. So I don't know. It loses a bit of interest for me. I know they're going to lose. I know the orcs are going to win. I know that's going to become Mordor. So I would rather the show focus on things that I don't know, so I can explore what I don't know, rather than just hammer on things that we already know how they're going to end. So, and we already know that they're going to create the rings eventually, but the show so far is just very unfocused on that plotline, really. It's just one of the 4 subplots when you have Celebrimbor with Elrond, that type of discussions, and it's very unfocused, and that's my primary criticism to the series. With all of this being said, I like the show. I don't want to say it's a bad show. I think it's a good show. I like it. I'm a big fan of Lord of the Rings. Maybe I look like too much of a critic, but I'm honestly just giving my thoughts about it. I like the Lord of the Rings. I love fantasy movies and TV series. I think the problem is also that, the Rings of Power is in the Lord of the Rings world. So by default, we will have that comparison, and that might kill the TV shows itself, because it's so hard to stay to that level, to the level of the movies. It's just almost impossible. It's just such an unbelievable level. So I want to give credit to at least try, to the Amazon Prime Video company and whatever, and director and everyone involved. Overall, it does look visually stunning. I would like this show more if it was more focused on the story, developing more the depth of singular character, because the problem is that you have all these characters thrown together in these subplots, right? And there are like 7 different characters in the story at the same time. And you can argue, well, that happened in Lord of the Rings too, but no, it didn't really. In Lord of the Rings, the story is about Frodo and Gandalf, and then Aragorn, Boromir, and all the others join into this one single mission that they are all trying to pursue. So it's, even if you have indeed many characters at one point, it's very focused. In this case, in this story, it's not like that. You start with so many characters, and because there are so many characters, it's really hard to get deep into single ones. You can't have that Frodo Gandalf conversation because you didn't build enough connection between 2 characters. I mean, and you really didn't get enough deep as well within each of those characters. I mean, I would argue that, you know, again, like Elrond and Durin, great dynamic, so far the best. But yeah, I think that's the risk of having so many characters all at once, and additionally not having these characters follow one single direction. You just lose focus, and you find yourself with so many characters, so little value, so little meaning as well, and overall an unfocused story. Again, like to me, probably so far the show would be something like a 6.7, maybe a 7.3. I can get up to 7.3 at least at the moment. Maybe it will change my mind. Maybe the last 2 episodes are great and they redeem everything. And, you know, maybe they are just doing world building at the moment. Maybe they plan to go on for I don't know how many seasons. So they are just doing world building right now, and then the series will start to kick later. I hope so, because I'm a big fan of Lord of the Rings. So I really hope that will happen. But at the moment, from episode 1 to episode 6, to me, it just feels like a fantasy movie without actual magic in it, for all the reasons that I provided. So yeah, I wanted to share my thoughts with you guys, and let me know what you think in the comments down below. What do you think about the show? Do you like it? Do you hate it? Do you think they're doing a great job? Is the show even comparable to the movies? What's your thoughts about it? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you enjoy this discussion, because I just want to discuss and share my thoughts with you guys. And yeah, just let me know down below in the comments what you think. I'll see you in the next video, and have a nice day, everyone.